Hi, welcome to the Elissa Goodman Show. And every week I get the honor to interview game changers in the wellness arena. So I feel so lucky because I get to meet these incredibly inspiring, smart people that are really making changes for people. And I have Sahara Rose on today, who is just a total love. She is only 26 years old, which absolutely blows my mind, and all the things she's done. She wrote a book, it came out last year, Idiot's Guide to Ayurveda, and I have it, I love it. I trained in Ayurveda for a little bit, and I absolutely love that way of living and eating, and we're gonna talk about that, but she is also someone who travels the world and helps people all over the world, which I think is so amazing. And what you do in terms of giving back to the community or to the world in terms of just health and just your inspiration in life, and your story is pretty amazing. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Elissa.
So talk a little bit about your story, because the whole idea of how you grew up and the health issues you went through, and some of the food you were eating, girl.
Yeah,
like, it was
the worst.
Crappy.
Yeah. So I grew up in Boston. My parents are from Iran in the Middle East. So growing up, my mom would try to give me Persian food, which is a lot of stews, and it's very similar to Ayurvedic principles because Persia was part of North India. Right. So it was all the same. But I resisted it because I wanted to fit in with the kids and, look like everyone else. And the easiest way was to just eat like everyone else. Right. So I started drinking the Kool-Aid, and pretty soon I got addicted. So I went down the rabbit hole of eating lots of fast food and, everything out of a box. And if something was like fresh, I would really reject it. So I just became addicted. And at first it was for the toys and the McDonald's box. And then pretty soon you become addicted to the sugar and the fats and the way that it makes you feel, right? Yeah. So then pretty soon I stopped wanting to go outside. I became very addicted to my TV, the computer, gaining a lot of weight. And I started to get allergies. And I went to different doctors and they told me that it just happens to some kids and you have allergies, and the allergies would get worse and worse to the point that I remember on Mother's Day, my eye had swollen up so much that we went to the emergency room because we thought a bee had stung me in the eye, because I literally couldn't open my eye. Wow. And I felt like I was breathing out of a straw. Like, because
you couldn't get air.
No air, right? Yeah. So we thought it was some sort of allergic reaction to a bee, because what could cause that? Right. And it turned out that was just the beginning of asthma. So I developed asthma. I was overweight. So I totally stopped going outside. I couldn't go outside for recess. I couldn't play any sports. I couldn't do anything, which just made me go even further inwards and more addicted to the junk food. Right.
Were you depressed and anxious
I think at that point, it's like you don't really know what that is because you're so young. So it's like if people didn't want to play with me, I'm like, whatever, I have a Game Boy. Right. So you just block it, at that age, you don't have the terminology for it yet.
Did you have an inhaler?
I had an inhaler. I dropped tons of, and every year the prescription would have to get higher because it was never enough. I couldn't sleep at night because I was just coughing and just crying and just thinking like, why me? Right. And it was just sad years. And then when I was around 12 years old, because I started middle school, I wanted to look good. So I wanted to lose weight. So I had heard about hot yoga, like I had read it in Cosmo, but I didn't really know what it was. So we drove by a studio called Prana Power Yoga, and I decided like, oh, that sounds cool. I'm going to give it a try. So here I am, this like super overweight 12-year-old asthma kid, and wearing like juicy sweatpants. Like no idea what to expect. Right. And I practiced, and obviously I didn't know the poses, but I loved how I was going into my body and not, because, in gym classes, it's like run a mile, do this. It's all competition, which like for me and what my dosha is, I'm so not competitive. Mm-hmm. So this was so inward and reflective, and I loved the feeling hot, and I really just could feel like almost like emotions dripping off of my body when I was sweating. So I started practicing more and more yoga and started to...
Were you the youngest kid in the class? Oh, by far.
For sure. I mean...
especially in those days.
Yeah, like early 2000s, like no one practices yoga.
It was really hot.
Yeah. So I start to kind of read more about yoga and the lifestyle, and I start reading books like Deepak Chopra and this and that, like super young. And I became vegan, and I started traveling to all these places, start volunteering in prisons and in orphans and building hospitals.
What age was that?
When I was 15, I lived in a prison in Costa Rica taking care of the kids.
Oh my.
Yeah. And then from there,
So what made you decide to do that? That's
honestly, I believe like
incredible.
past life stuff,
Okay.
because it's like when you're like, I just knew from that age, I'm like, the purpose of my life is to help others.
Right.
And everyone says that, but I was like, no, like, I knew that I needed to either join the Peace Corps or become a human shield. Like I was like, I need to help people, but I didn't know the way.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, the most extreme way is to become a nun and move to Mother Teresa's colony. So I'll do that. Like
Right,
I will just do
right.
anything to help people.
Had you
So
always been that way, even before, as a kid? Or
I
just
think like
you
as a
discovered
kid,
that?
like, you care, but you don't know. You
Yeah.
don't really know about poverty. And going to Iran as a kid, I would see like this was during the Taliban.
Right,
So
right.
there were a lot of Afghani refugees escaping the Taliban. So I would see them get beat up in the street, get whipped by metal chains in the street. So you see these things from a young age and that level of poverty that you're
Yeah.
like
That's
you're talking to a
traumatic.
kid and then suddenly they're taken like this in front of you. So you see
Yeah.
like, oh my God, like the world is just not this little bubble, but at the same time, that bubble has stuff going on in it too. So,
And you had such a kind of a nice life here.
Right.
So it was quite a different way
Exactly.
of looking at these
Yeah.
two things, two worlds.
So yeah, so and then I realized that it's not just Iran; it's every part of the world has its own issues, whether it's not able to read or rights or whatever else. So basically, then in college, I get more and more into health. I studied at IIN, which I
Right.
think you did too.
I didn't. I did
No,
a
okay.
course here because they weren't offering like
Okay.
online when I did
Okay.
it.
So then I
yeah.
switched my major from international relations. I started sports nutrition and I went like very deep into nutrition. I became a raw vegan.
Okay.
And I started a blog called Eat Feel Fresh, and it was like a raw vegan nutrition blog.
How long did you do that?
Well, I'm still blogging,
Yeah,
so now
yes.
it's been like
Right.
8 years since I
But
started
you
that.
aren't raw vegan.
No,
still,
I'm not.
right?
I'm not a raw
How
vegan.
long were you raw vegan?
So I probably was like eating a lot of raw foods and then slowly like maybe 50%, 80%. And then when it was basically all raw foods was like 8 months.
Okay.
And it was in Boston, so it was really cold. So at first I felt really great.
Yeah.
And then I started realizing I'm so cold all the time. And it's like Boston, it's like everyone's cold, but like this is like a new layer of cold that I've never felt before. Like I can't sleep. My lips are purple. I'm just shaking.
Right.
And everything that I eat, if I don't eat like in the right order or something, my stomach hurts so bad.
Ugh.
Like let's say I eat a salad and then drink
Yeah.
coconut water after. I'm like on the couch, like in so much pain. So I thought maybe I have parasites, maybe I have this, that, can't figure out the issues. And my hair is falling out. I'm losing tons of weight. People are telling me like, are you okay? Like you look sick. And at first, like when you lose weight, you're like, oh, it's a compliment.
Right.
But it's like this, if you saw pictures of me, I was like 30 pounds less than I am now,
Wow.
which is a lot when you're 5'4".
Right.
So, and then I didn't get my period, and at first I didn't care because it's like what girl wants her period.
Right.
But after a year without any periods,
Yeah.
it's like okay, something's going on. So I went to endocrinologist and gastroenterologist and every kind of
Right,
doctor,
right.
urologist you can imagine.
Yes.
And they're like, oh, you don't get your period, just take birth control. Like, oh, you can't eat, you have IBS. Like just giving me a pill, masking symptom. I was
Right.
like, well, doesn't this mean I like, can't get pregnant? And they're like, oh, well, you can get in vitro one day. I'm like, okay, I'm 21 and already
God. Yeah.
in vitro.
Right,
Like,
right.
I just knew this is not the way.
Not
There
the
has
way.
to be a reason. But I thought my diet is the one thing I'm doing right. You know, I'm following David Wolf.
thought
I'm
so.
following this.
Yeah.
I thought this must be the way. So it has to be something else. And then while I was volunteering in India, I had heard of Ayurveda in IIN, and I decided to go to a Ayurvedic doctor just to like I thought it was like a psychic or astrologer. I didn't think it was like real.
I thought that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, I'll see what she has to say.
Right.
And, you know, she takes my pulse and looks at my tongue. And she's like, I came in for my digestion. She's like, so what kind of dreams do you have? I'm like, dreams? She's like, do you fly? Or is it more realistic or romantic? I'm like, why is she asking me
Right,
about my
right.
dreams? And then basically she's like, Beta, you have very, very bad vata imbalance. I'm like, what? What? I like had heard
Do you
of
remember what kind of dreams? Kind
I'm
of told
always
you that
I'm
story?
always moving. My dreams are always like active and moving. Oh, I also have reoccurring dreams my whole life of someone chasing me and running, or someone breaking in, which is all
very
very
common.
vata. No, it's all vata.
Okay, that's
Vata
me, okay.
people's dreams are moving, fleeing, flying. Pitta people's dreams are like realistic, like a situation going on in their life and like different ways they'd solve it. And
Okay.
kaphas just don't dream, or it's like very like romantic and indulgent, like a sex dream, or they're
Okay.
eating chocolate or
I
something.
want to be more coffee then. Absolutely.
Yeah. So she starts
interesting.
telling me, and she's like, And I don't tell her about my period, but she's like, yeah, you're not getting your period. And like, you're too pretty to not have a baby. I was like, okay. So she just knew everything just from the symptoms, the dreams, all of these things. So I was very curious, but at the same time, the suggestions she gave me really didn't resonate with me because I'm a vegan.
Of what to do. Yes.
Yeah, and she's like, ghee on everything, rice and lentils. She said, basically, I have to just eat khichdi, which is rice, mung beans, and ghee for the next like 3 months. Like, that's it.
Right.
And I was like, there's no way. Because, you know, I love green juices. I love salads. Even in India, I was eating raw foods.
Right.
So,
and not getting sick?
No, I've never gotten sick in India, thank God.
Okay, that's impressive.
But I don't eat street food. I would like order it from this organic farm and have them bring it to me and like wash it. But it's very unheard of to eat raw foods in India. Like people thought I was so weird. So I'm like, okay, I like what she's saying. I like the guidelines, but I can't do this food. And she gives me all these herbs and I'm like, how am I going to keep this up?
Right.
So I'm like, okay, I want to study Ayurveda and learn more about it, but kind of like bring in my own like holistic and modern way.
Yeah.
So I signed up for Ayurveda School and I start studying its Ayurvedic nutrition and cooking. And the whole time I'm like trying to think like, okay, maybe they could use quinoa here. They could do sweet potatoes there, or like just fixing, or like, you know, you could use coconut oil instead of ghee or sesame oil or whatever else. So I start learning and also realizing how much we've changed as people, how much the food industry has changed since Ayurvedic times. Ayurveda, for people who don't know, if I haven't explained this, it's the world's oldest health system. So it's 5,000 years old. So think about how different the world was. There was no genetic modification. There was no, people were farmers. They were working outside. Like they could eat a lot of like heavier foods because they actually needed it. Whereas now we're sitting
burning all that energy.
Exactly. Whereas now if all I do is eat like tons of rice and bread all day, I'll just gain weight because I'm sitting on my computer.
Right.
So I'm like, things need to change. And like, you know, with you know so much about alkalinity, like that's something that is so important that the majority of the classical traditional Ayurvedic foods tend to skew a lot. I mean, it's not super alkaline, but it's not acidic. It's like in between. But if you already are more acidic, it's not going to alkalize you.
Yeah.
So how can we add in more leafy greens? How can we add in more fresh foods into this?
Right.
So I started creating my own approach, which I kind of called Alkaline Ayurveda, which my next book is all about. It's an Alkaline Ayurveda cookbook.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
and
start feeling so much better, not just in the body, but in the mind, which I really wasn't expecting. Like I thought it was normal for it to take like 2 hours to fall asleep every night. And turns out that's not normal. Like I thought it was normal to like always need a scarf, always need a sweater. Like if this was me a few years ago, I'd be like wrapped up.
You would not be in the dress.
For sure. Yeah, I would see people on like Halloween, these short skirts. I'm like, how do they do that?
Yeah.
Well, still, I kind of feel that way. But like just feeling so much more grounded, right?
Yeah.
Like before, I had no idea what I wanted to do in my life. I would be in all these places. I was such a traveler. I was so wanderlust. I was always searching. And then really realizing
there was
like
no grounded place for you.
Exactly. And it's like, okay, in this quest of searching, like just go within. And like to help people, first you have to heal yourself. Like if you're not whole, how are you going to go around helping people as half a person? The best thing you can do is really go within, and then you can come out from a whole place.
So what age were you when that all came about?
So this was around 2012, which was like a very transformational year for everyone. So I was like 21 when I started studying Ayurveda and things like that. And then kind of instantly when I was studying, so I ended up living in India for 2 years. After I graduated from college, I moved to India and I ended up just studying Ayurveda and started
2 years. And was it just fabulous experience?
Yeah, I mean, difficult, very difficult, but also amazing. And people always ask me, where do you study Ayurveda? And I'm like, go to India. But also like, I did not take everything they said, like, you know, I took it all with a grain of salt because I realized
it wasn't 100% for you.
Right. It's like, you know, when you go to India, you're going to eat differently than when you eat here. When you go to Japan, everywhere. So even Ayurveda, traditional Ayurveda was made for people in India. But what I love is the Ayurvedic theories, which is actually saying eat what's local, eat what's seasonal, eat what works for you. So I think people need to take like this broader look of like what Ayurveda is really about. Because I think people get so caught up in like the text or it says this. It's like, well, really what it's telling you is to use your own intuition and to know about your doshas and know about your body's wisdom. So knowing that changed everything from what I want to do career-wise. Now I look at the doshas in terms of everything, in terms of relationships, in terms of seeing the world, because it shows up in every way. It's like I can
every
literally
part of your life. I never thought about that because I really always focused it more on the food.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
because think about it, Vata people, like we are both super Vata, so we're
Right.
like bouncing off ideas
Yeah.
and we're talking about all these things.
Let's get moving.
Right. But if someone's more Pitta, they'd be
Yeah.
like, okay, what are the questions of the interview? And I'm going to answer it next. Right? I'm sure you've seen people
Yes,
like that. They have their
absolutely.
answer and it's next.
Yeah.
Whereas we're just flowing.
Yeah.
And then someone who's more Kapha, they'd probably sit, let it
They're
sink
quieter.
in. They just answered from a deeper place. Yeah. You know,
Yeah,
like, and then
right.
sometimes when you're about to, you're like, what are you going to say? But it's like,
Do Kaphas have a hard time though getting
expressing,
expressing,
yeah. So Kaphas can often have like throat chakra issues. Like Fern
Like
is a great
thyroid
example. Before
stuff?
she started expressing herself,
Yeah.
she had thyroid, and then when she started singing, she rebalanced her kapha. So that's kapha is
That's a very good point.
Yeah,
About
so-
all of that, the singing.
So it's all very
voice.
throat. So
Yeah.
when I was a kid, I had a kapha imbalance. So I had all this mucus, all of this phlegm, all like asthma, swelling. That's all related to kapha. Too
Right.
much earth, too much grounding. I wasn't moving. I'm gaining
Yeah.
weight. I'm staying in.
Right.
And then we're all born with different amounts. So since I had been born with more kapha, it was more easy for me to fall into that. Whereas
Yes.
someone who's born with more pitta, that probably wouldn't happen. So we each have like a born constitution that we're born
Okay.
with. Like we're born with all three, but in different amounts.
Okay.
So let's say I was born probably I was born more with Vata and then Kapha and last Pitta.
Okay.
So then when I was a kid, I was being very Kapha, being lazy, eating a lot. So my Kapha
So
went
your
really
kapha went
up.
up. Right.
And then I got a Kapha imbalance. Then when I became raw vegan, my Vata went really
yeah.
up. So then I had those imbalances. Whereas I'm just not a very competitive Pitta, like that sort of person. The times that I've tried, I burn myself out because my body's like, this is just not for you. Like I'll try to like be super scheduled or like go
Right.
boxing, and I'll literally like get adrenal fatigue or like
Right.
break out in hives. Like my body's like, even spicy foods, my body does not want. So your body is communicating with you, but you have to know what is your natural constitution.
That is so true.
Yeah.
I mean, just like you're saying, like tuning in is so crucial, and
Yeah.
like knowing where you're off balance.
Yes.
And this is such an easy way to kind of put yourself back on track.
Totally.
You know, because you can say to yourself, oh, maybe I need more greens, or I need, more nourishing, like hot foods,
Yes.
but you really don't know why.
Right.
And this tells you why.
Right. And the thing is, it's like, so people are all about intuitive eating, but that works when you know your body. So
Yeah.
in Ayurveda, they think of it like a pendulum swinging in two directions, and one side is balance and the other side is imbalance.
Right.
So the more balanced you are, the more you crave the foods that bring you into balance. So as a Vata, you love soups. You love these warming foods because your body's like, yes, that feels really good. But let's say you spiral into, you start doing lots of raw foods, lots of salads, lots of juice cleanses. You start going to that, you're going to start to be like, ooh, actually, I really like that. Actually, I don't want more warming foods. It feels too grounding for me.
Right,
It feels too
right.
heavy. And then you're going to
I start
spiral
flying.
the other way. Yeah. And then you're going to notice all of the Vata. Maybe
Yeah.
you're feeling more dry. Maybe you're feeling more anxious. So you have to just shift the pendulum towards balance. At first, it may feel kind of weird, but that's normally like, it takes a week to
Yeah.
overcome.
Yeah.
And then you
so
start.
It's not very long.
Exactly.
5 days, whatever.
For
it is.
sure. I
Yeah.
mean, the more out of balance you are, the longer it's going to
Yeah.
take when you're eating junk foods. But let's say you're just sort of like, you had a bad weekend. Like, if you just eat good during the week, you'll come right back. Like, people think it's like, oh, I have to force myself, but your taste buds change all the time. So it takes 21 days to really retrain your taste buds. So
Right.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I love everything you're
Yay,
doing.
thank you.
And you also radiate the
Thank
life.
you.
And you love what you do.
Yeah.
And it's so amazing at such a young age to be able to like have a passion and a purpose and really be grounded in it.
Thank you.
It's quite exquisite, I have to say. So I ask all my guests, if they had to sum up their mission in one word, what would yours be?
I think my mission truly, and all of our missions, is to raise consciousness. We're all doing it in different ways, but really the reason that we incarnated is to raise consciousness. And Ayurveda is just one tool, but it's just a tool so you can really realize what your dharma is, what your life purpose is.
Yeah.
Because it's like when you're sick, all you can think about is getting better. But, people get so stuck in the wellness of like, oh, I need to get more well. What's the point? Like, there's no like award you get. You
Right, at the
have the
end
best
of the-
digestion in the
yeah,
world.
the day.
Like, yeah, is that what you want? Like, spoken at your funeral. So it's like
Right.
you have good digestion, so you don't have to worry about it, and you can go do the things that you want to do.
Right. And you have the energy.
Exactly.
And the vitality.
Exactly.
And the mental, just your brain is
Exactly. Health is just a tool. It's like the gasoline
Yeah,
you put into your
true.
car, but it really matters where you're going.
Right. To get you to that ultimate place.
Yes.
Oh, well, I could have talked to you for hours.
I
wish it was
know.
longer.
Yes.
But thank you.
Thank
for
you
being
so
on my
much.
show.
Oh, thank you. Yay.